Chatterfang Squirrel General debuted in Modern Horizons 2 and is a 3/3 Squirrel Warrior with Forest Walk for 2 and 1 green mana. If one or more tokens would be created under our control, those tokens, plus that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens, are created instead. Note the text here. It says if one or more tokens would be created. It does not say if one or more creature tokens would be created. So, creating non-creature tokens, like treasures and foods, will also trigger Chatterfang. Our general also has an activated ability. We can pay a black mana and sacrifice X squirrels to give target creature plus X minus X until end of turn. We plan to utilize this ability as a sacrifice outlet and a source of opponent creature removal. It also can act as a part of a soon-to-be showcased set of combo win conditions, which will leave our opponents bewildered, and which will allow us to count victory after victory after victory. We have 34 lands in the deck. We don't need a lot of them, especially because nearly 75% of the spells in this build cost 3 or less mana to cast. That number balloons to nearly 90% if we include spells that have mana values of 4 as well. We also benefit from playing a 2-color deck, and when one of those colors is green, we reap the benefits of easy mana fixing and mana ramping. With this in mind, we begin this portion of our deck tech with 5 basic swamps and 13 basic forests. We lean more heavily toward green mana here, since green is the dominance color of our build. Although green is our dominance color, we still must account for our black spells and abilities as well. The bulk of our black mana will be obtained through black and green mana-producing lands like Command Tower, Overgrown Tomb, Woodland Cemetery, and Undergrowth Stadium. The Tomb, Cemetery, and Stadium enter the battlefield tapped unless we respectively pay 2 life, control a swamp or forest, or have 2 or more opponents. We can tap Llanowar Wastes and Nurturing Peatland for a black or a green mana, but the Wastes deals 1 point of damage to us, while the Peatland has us lose 1 life. Llanowar Wastes can also tap to add a colorless mana, while we can pay a generic mana, tap and sacrifice Nurturing Peatland to draw a card. Twilight Mire and Tainted Wood tap to add a colorless mana. The Mire allows us to pay a black or a green mana and tap it to add any combination of 2 black and or green mana. While we can tap Tainted Wood to add a black or green mana, but we can only activate this ability if we control a swamp. Although it is not a true dual land, Darkboar Pathway allows us to immediately fix our need for black mana. Or we can put it into play as Slitherboar Pathway and immediately fix our need for green mana. Granted, we do not reap the benefit of having access to both black and green mana from this land, but it does provide on-the-spot mana fixing. We also have some mana-accelerating land options in Castle Garenbrig and Phyrexian Tower. Castle Garenbrig enters tapped unless we control a forest. It taps to add a green mana, and we can pay 2 and 2 green mana and tap it to add 6 green mana to our mana pool, but we can only spend this mana to cast creature spells or activated abilities of creatures. Since Chatterfang will be a lightning rod for retention, we will most likely use Castle Garenbrig's accelerated mana to account for commander tax. Phyrexian Tower taps to add a colorless mana, or we can tap it, sacrifice a creature, and add 2 black mana to our mana pool. We will have a lot of disposable creature tokens on our side of the battlefield, and these babies are great sacrificial fodder for mana acceleration with Phyrexian Tower. Now let's close out this section of our deck tech with some utility land options. If we tap and sacrifice Command Beacon, then we can put our commander into our hand from the command zone. As mentioned earlier, Chatterfang will command a lot of attention from our opponents, so Command Beacon provides us the option to skirt paying commander tax for a turn. We can tap High Market and sacrifice a creature to gain 1 life. This sacrifice outlet becomes more valuable as we continue unveiling the 99 of this deck. We also have a couple of lands that can create creature tokens. Barad-dûr comes into play tapped unless we control a legendary creature. We can pay XX and black mana and tap Barad-dûr to amass Orcs X, but we can only activate this ability if a creature died this turn. To pay XX, we pay the same amount of mana for each X cost. To amass Orcs X, if we do not control an army creature, then we create a 0/0 black Orc army creature token. Then we choose an army creature we control and put X +1/+1 counters on it. Mirrex can also create creature tokens. We can pay 3 generic mana and tap Mirrex to create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1 that cannot block. When a creature with Toxic 1 deals damage to a player, that player gets 1 poison counter, and a player with 10 or more poison counters loses the game. Also, when Mirrex enters the battlefield, we can tap it to add 1 mana of any color as another immediate mana fixer. Utilizing these lands as token producers provides additional sources of Chatterfang triggering shenanigans. One of the benefits of playing green is having access to a wide array of mana ramp. Llanowar Elves, Thinhorn Elves, and Elvish Mystic tap to add 1 green mana to our mana pool, while Birds of Paradise taps to add 1 mana of any color. Note that BOP flies, and, if needed, it can chump block an opponent's airborne threat. If we are sculpting a creature token build spearheaded by a creature token producing commander, then Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, and Growing Rights of Itlimoc are nearly auto-includes in the 99. Jaheira gives tokens we control the ability to tap to add a green mana to our mana pool. Note that Jaheira provides this ability to any token we control, and not just creature tokens. When Growing Rights of Itlimoc comes into play, we look at the top 4 cards of our library. We may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into our hand. Then we put the rest on the bottom of our library in any order. Since more than 1/3 of this deck is filled with creature cards, the odds are in our favor of seeing at least 1 creature from these 4 cards. Card advantage is nice, but extreme mana acceleration is even better, and that is where this card shines. At the beginning of our end step, if we control 4 or more creatures, which we very easily will, then we transform Growing Rights of Itlimoc into Itlimoc, Cradle of the Sun, a legendary land that taps to add a green mana, or it taps to add a green mana for each creature we control. Note that this is a better version of Gaia's Cradle, as we can tap this land for mana even if we do not control any creatures. No need to worry, we will control a lot of creatures with this deck. Lastly, for this section of our deck tech, we have Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. You know what they do. One taps for 2 colorless mana, the other taps for 1 mana of our commander's color identity. The 2 most ubiquitous mana artifacts in the Commander format are the only 2 mana artifacts in this Chatterfang deck. Keeping cards flowing into our hand will help to ensure that we continue to develop our side of the battlefield and overwhelm our opponents. For creature token decks everywhere, is there any better source of card draw than Skullclamp? It has a mana value of 1 and an equip cost of 1 as well. When attached, it gives equipped creature +1/-1. Outside of toughness boosts, if we equip this to one of our creature tokens, that creature token dies, and then we draw 2 cards. We essentially pay 1 generic mana and kill one of our creature tokens in order to draw 2 cards. We will do this every day of the week, and more than twice during Friday Night Magic. Whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, Oran Frostfang and Toski, Bearer of Secrets, draw us a card. Note the text on these 2 cards. They say whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player. They do not say whenever 1 or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player. If 5 of our creatures deal combat damage to players, we draw 5 cards. Or 10 if we have both of these creatures on our side of the battlefield at the same time. To incentivize our opponent's willingness to allow us to draw cards, Oran Frostfang gives attacking creatures we control Death Touch. Do our opponents want to trade down with some lonely 1/1 creature tokens, or allow us to draw some cards? That's their headache, not ours. As for Toski, he cannot be countered, has indestructible, and must attack each combat if able. Chatterfang is grateful. For a couple of one-and-done burst card-drawing spells at instant speed, both Plumb the Forbidden and Return of the Wildspeaker could fill our hands with something grand. Plumb the Forbidden has us draw a card and lose 1 life, but as an additional cost to cast it, we may sacrifice 1 or more creatures. If we do, then we copy the spell for each creature sacrificed this way. Casting Plumb the Forbidden in response to a board wipe or an overloaded Cyclonic Rift could yield us quite a bounty of cards. Return of the Wildspeaker doubles as card draw or as a combat win condition. We choose to either draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures we control, or non-human creatures we control get +3/+3 until end of turn. Either option works well for us, but not so much for our opponents. Admittedly, our suite of removal spells is light in this deck, but we are not worried. We have a lightning-fast deck and should easily be able to stay ahead of our opponents until we have the pieces of our game-winning combo assembled. Just in case, we have a small smattering of spells to help pass the time if our combo pieces elude us. Beast Within destroys target permanent, and its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token, while Assassin's Trophy destroys target permanent an opponent controls, and the controller of the destroyed permanent searches their library for a basic land and puts it onto the battlefield. Note that we could target a permanent we control with Beast Within, and if our general is on our side of the battlefield, then we will create a 3/3 beast and a 1/1 squirrel. Pest Infestation destroys up to X target artifacts and/or enchantments, and we create twice X 1/1 black and green pest creature tokens with, when this creature dies, we gain 1 life. Note the text on the spell. It destroys up to X target artifacts and/or enchantments. So, if for some reason our opponent's sides of the battlefield are without any artifacts and/or enchantments to target, then we can still cast this spell with 0 targets and still create twice X pest creature tokens. Also note that this spell has the XX in its mana value, similar to the activated ability of the aforementioned Barad-dûr. We also have a couple of board wipes in Toxic Deluge and Azuri's Predation. As an additional cost to cast Toxic Deluge, we pay X life, and all creatures get -X/-X until end of turn. This spell bypasses Shroud, Hexproof, Ward, Indestructible, and other forms of protection. As for Azuri's Predation, for each creature our opponents control, we create a 4/4 green Phyrexian Beast creature token, and then each of those tokens fights a different one of those creatures. This on-theme removal spell has the potential to tip the battlefield completely into our favor, if it isn't already. Now let's showcase some cards that create tokens for the purposes of triggering Chatterfang's Squirrel Creature Token Creating ability. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, Gala Greeters has us choose one of the following 3 modes that has not been chosen this turn. Either we put a +1/+1 counter on Gala Greeters, we create a tapped treasure token, or we gain 2 life. Note the text on this card. It says whenever another creature enters. It does not say whenever another non-token creature enters. Our creature tokens will trigger Gala Greeters, and we should easily be able to put a +1/+1 counter on this Elf Druid, create a tapped treasure token, and gain 2 life each turn this card is on our side of the battlefield, and sometimes during our opponent's turns as well. Through their landfall abilities, Tireless Provisioner and Scute Swarm create different tokens. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, the Provisioner creates either a food token or a treasure token. Scute Swarm follows suit, but instead of treasures or foods, it creates a 1/1 green insect creature token. However, if we control 6 or more lands, instead of a 1/1 insect token, it creates a token that's a copy of Scute Swarm. The mana acceleration provided by the Provisioner's treasures is great, but let's not overlook the small pocket of food synergies we have in this build. Let's also not overlook how out of control Scute Swarm can become if left unchecked. particularly if our general is on our side of the battlefield while Skewed Swarm is creating multiple copies of itself each and every turn. When Deranged Hermit and Deep Forest Hermit enter the battlefield, we create 4 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. The deranged one has an echo cost of 3 and 2 green mana, which means that at the beginning of our upkeep, if this elf came under our control since the beginning of our last upkeep, we sacrifice it unless we pay its echo cost. Deep Forest Hermit has Vanishing 3, which means that it enters the battlefield with 3 time counters on it. At the beginning of our upkeep, we remove a time counter from it, and when the last time counter is removed, we sacrifice it. Each of these creatures also provide anthem effects to squirrels, as Deranged Hermit gives all squirrels +1/+1, while Deep Forest Hermit gives squirrels we control +1/+1. These burst squirrel creature token producers are not long for this world due to their respective echo and vanishing mechanics, but their enter the battlefield triggers are highly coveted alongside the presence of Chatterfang on our side of the battlefield. Whenever another creature we control dies, Pitiless Plunderer creates a treasure token. Note the text here. It says whenever another creature we control dies. It does not say whenever another non-token creature we control dies. It's a little pricey at 3 and 1 black mana, but Pitiless Plunderer is one of the most powerful cards in this build, and is a key cog to multiple combo engines that we will showcase later in this deck tech. At instant speed, Second Harvest creates a token copy for each token we control, essentially doubling all tokens we control upon the successful resolution of the spell. Imagine casting this spell during our last opponent's end step while Chatterfang is on our side of the battlefield. That could easily lead to a round of good games as we untap with a massive board state inundated with various tokens. The same could be said about Saproling Symbiosis. If we pay an additional 2 generic mana when we cast it, then we can cast this sorcery spell as though it had flash. Either way, we create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token for each creature we control. Although we are not doubling each token we control as Second Harvest does, we are essentially doubling the number of creatures we control, which should lead to victory soon after. We can tap Hazel of the Root Bloom, pay 2 life, and tap X untapped tokens we control to add X mana in any combination of colors to our mana pool. In this type of build, this mana acceleration can lead to inordinately explosive and potentially game-winning turns. Hazel also has an end-step trigger that pairs with Chatterfang beautifully, as we create a token that's a copy of target token we control. However, if that token is a squirrel, then we create 2 tokens that are copies of it instead. With the combined mana acceleration and token production of this Squirrel Druid, Hazel can be considered one of the most powerful cards in the 99 of this build. If 1 or more tokens would be created under our control, those tokens are created, and Peregrine Took creates an additional food token. This halfling citizen also allows us to sacrifice 3 foods to draw a card. Peregrine Took is a sneaky good card in this Chatterfang build. At the beginning of each upkeep, Belladross Witherbloom creates a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with, when this creature dies, we gain 1 life. Note the text here. It says at the beginning of each upkeep. It does not say at the beginning of our upkeep. Belladross triggers at the beginning of every player's upkeep. The more players, the merrier at the EDH table when this Elder Dragon is on our side of the battlefield. Belladross, with a healthy mana value of 5 black and a green, is the second most expensive card in this build mana-wise. However, this mana value is mitigated by an activated ability that allows us to pay 10 life to untap all lands we control. Although we can only activate this ability once each turn, it is powerful enough to warrant inclusion into this build. Note that this ability does not include the dreaded activate only as a sorcery restriction, meaning that we can activate this ability during our opponent's turns as well. Instead of tapping our lands to cast spells that create tokens, let's tap our lands to create tokens by including a copy of Bootlegger's Stash. This artifact gives our lands the ability to tap to create a treasure token, and when our general is on our side of the battlefield as well, we can create a treasure token and a squirrel token by simply tapping one of our lands. Chatterfang approves. Our opponents may not. When Experimental Confectioner enters the battlefield, we create a food token, and whenever we sacrifice a food, we create a 1/1 black rat creature token that cannot block. Although this human peasant has a one and done enter the battlefield token producing ability, its repeatable rat token producing ability synergizes with the food sub-theme that is woven into this build. Skuriok has evolved, which means that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, if that creature has a greater power or a greater toughness than Skuriok, then we put a +1/+1 counter on Skuriok, and whenever we put a +1/+1 counter on Skuriok, we create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. Although this tree folk is only a 1/2, and the majority of tokens we create in this build will not trigger its evolve ability, Skuriok is an important piece to various game-winning combos in this build, which we will showcase later in this deck tech. So far, we have showcased an array of various token-producing spells and abilities that synergize with our general's squirrel token-producing trigger. What else are we going to do with these tokens? Of course, we can send our creature tokens into combat and overwhelm our opponent's defenses and life totals. This is always a fun option, but let's use our tokens for more than just combat. We have a lot of ways to create tokens, so let's consider them to be expendable. If they are expendable, then we should dispose of them through the use of various sacrifice outlets and reap the benefits of their demise. How can we benefit? Oh, let's count the ways, starting with some of the best free-to-use sacrifice outlets in the game. Let's use our creature tokens for mana acceleration by sacrificing them for 2 colorless mana with Ashnod's Altar, or for 1 mana of any color with Phyrexian Altar. Let's use our creature tokens as a non-combat win condition by sacrificing them to Altar of Dementia and have target player mill cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Let's use our creature tokens for card advantage by sacrificing them to Viscera Seer and Woe Strider to allow us to scry 1. Note that we can sacrifice the Seer itself to scry, while Woe Strider has to sacrifice other creatures in order to do the same. To appease Chatterfang, when Woe Strider comes into play, we create a 0/1 white goat creature token. Woe Strider also can escape for 3 and 2 black mana and exiling 4 other cards from our graveyard, which means that we can cast it from our graveyard by paying these costs. When Woe Strider escapes, we put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. We can also sacrifice our creatures to put charge counters on Spawning Pit, or to put +1/+1 counters on Carrion Feeder. We can pay 1 generic mana and remove 2 charge counters from Spawning Pit in order to create a 2/2 colorless Spawn artifact creature token. Note that Carrion Feeder cannot block. Both Yawgmoth Thran Physician and Warren Soul Trader allow us to pay 1 life and sacrifice another creature for different benefits. Yawgmoth has us put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature and draws us a card, while the Soul Trader creates a treasure token. We can also pay 2 black mana and discard a card to proliferate with Yawgmoth, and he has protection from humans. Although we are limited by the pay 1 life activation costs of these sacrifice outlets, the benefits of drawing cards, managing the battlefield, creating tokens, and mana acceleration hedge against these detriments. Plus, as we soon will demonstrate, we have many ways to soften the blow of losing this life. We can pay 2 and 1 black mana and sacrifice a creature with Ruthless Knave in order to create 2 treasure tokens. This Orc Pirate also allows us to sacrifice 3 treasures to draw a card. Let's not be intimidated by the mana cost of Ruthless Knave's sacrifice ability. As we will showcase soon, we have ways to manage it without forfeiting tempo or momentum. Plus, the potential benefit of drawing cards at will is too tempting to ignore. We have a general that creates a creature token for each token we create. We have a slew of cards that create tokens. We have numerous beneficial uses for these creature tokens upon their sacrifice. Through the sacrifice of our creature tokens, let's drain our opponent's life totals as an alternate win condition to combat. When it comes to marrying these concepts together, no singular card does it better than Mirkwood Bats. It may be the most powerful life-draining win condition for token decks right now. Whenever we create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. Mirkwood Bats forces our opponents to lose life as our tokens come into play and when they leave play, usually through our various sacrifice outlets. Note that we do not even need a sacrifice outlet for our treasure tokens. A slight step behind the oh-so-powerful Mirkwood Bats is Nadir's Nightblade. Whenever a token we control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. Note the text on these 2 cards. They are triggered by any token we control, and not just creature tokens. As a background, Agent of the Iron Throne gives Chatterfang the ability to have each opponent lose 1 life whenever an artifact or creature we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield. Marionette Apprentice is nearly identical, but excludes herself as a trigger. The Apprentice also has Fabricate 1, which means that when she comes into play, we put a +1/+1 counter on her, or we create a 1/1 colorless Servo artifact creature token. Guess which option we will choose? These cards extend their triggers to all artifacts and creatures we control, and not just tokens. Although it is not triggered by artifacts or artifact tokens, Poison Tip Archer extends its life-draining ability to any creature that dies, and not just creatures we control. Gaining life while our opponents lose life can create chasm-like discrepancies in life total between us and our opponents. Bastion of Remembrance and Zilliport Cutthroat do this in spades, as whenever a creature we control dies, they have each opponent lose 1 life and we gain 1 life. The Bastion also creates a 1/1 white human soldier creature token when it enters the battlefield. Chatterfang approves. Our opponents will not. Another option is Cauldron Familiar. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. We can sacrifice a food to return Cauldron Familiar from our graveyard to the battlefield. With a plethora of sacrifice outlets at our disposal, and a food sub-theme present in this deck, Cauldron Familiar could cause a lot of headaches for our opponents. Lastly, we have the Meat Hook Massacre, which can double as mass removal and life draining. When this enchantment enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. Note that we can still cast the spell for 2 black mana while paying 0 mana for X. Once in play, whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we gain 1 life. Now let's showcase a slew of cards that synergize with and enhance our aristocratic token theme. When Prosperous Innkeeper enters the battlefield, we create a treasure token, and whenever another creature we control comes into play, we gain 1 life. This halfling citizen provides another source of life gain for the purposes of mitigating the life lost from some of our aforementioned sacrifice outlets. Essence Warden follows suit, as whenever another creature enters the battlefield, we gain 1 life. Note that this ability triggers when any creature comes into play, and not just ours. Heroic Intervention is a great way to protect our board state from interaction while we are revving up our game-winning combo engine. It gives permanents we control hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Tamiyo's Safekeeping is a lighter version of Heroic Intervention, as it grants hexproof and indestructible to target permanent we control. We also gain 2 life. Camellia the Seed Miser has Menace, gives other squirrels we control Menace, and whenever we sacrifice 1 or more foods, we create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. This squirrel warlock also has the Forage mechanic. Here, we can pay 2 generic mana and either exile 3 cards from our graveyard or sacrifice a food to put a +1/+1 counter on each other squirrel we control. With the amount of mana we can generate in this deck, combined with the potential to create a lot of food tokens, we can easily forage without exiling any cards from our graveyard. Her squirrel creature token producing trigger aside, Camellia provides evasion and buffing for our squirrels, both of which can help us reach victory through combat. Speaking of buffing creatures to reach victory through combat, Mazarek, Crawl Death Priest checks that box, and, as we will showcase later in this deck tech, a few more. This 2/2 flying insect shaman puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control whenever a player sacrifices another permanent. Note that these +1/+1 counters are doled out whenever any player sacrifices any permanent. Not just us, and not just creatures. Imagine the combat headaches from which our opponents will suffer if we were to send 15 to 20 1/1 creature tokens into combat with an available sacrifice outlet and Mazarek on our side of the battlefield. Game over. Since the 99 of this deck is chock filled with combo pieces, let's ensure that we can find them when we need them. The oft forgotten but uber powerful Evolutionary Leap offers an immense value in this type of build. We can pay a green mana and sacrifice a creature to reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a creature card. We put that card into our hand and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. There are so many creatures in this build that act as components of our game-ending combos, and Evolutionary Leap can help us find them. Survival of the Fittest is another green enchantment that can find the creatures we're looking for. We can pay a green mana and discard a creature card to search our library for a creature card, reveal it, and put it directly into our hand. As an additional cost to cast Diabolic Intent, we sacrifice a creature, which is not a problem here. We then search our library for a card and put it into our hand. Diabolic Intent is identical to Demonic Tutor, minus the creature sacrifice, and a whole lot of money. Finale of Devastation has us search our library and or graveyard for a creature card with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield. If our missing combo piece is in our graveyard or library, then this sorcery will find it and put it directly into play. As an additional bonus, if we would prefer to win the game via combat, then Finale of Devastation provides this option. If X is 10 or more, then creatures we control get +X/+X and gain haste until end of turn. Note that even if we do not find a creature card with mana value X or less, creatures we control still get +X/+X and gain haste as long as X is 10 or more. The versatility of this card suits this type of deck amazingly. We either find a game-winning combo piece, or we buff our army of creature tokens for game-ending combat. Either way, we win. Continuing with some more graveyard recursion, we have Unearth, Eternal Witness, and Reanimate. Unearth returns target creature card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to our hand, while Eternal Witness returns target card from our graveyard to our hand when she enters the battlefield. Unearth also has Cycling, which allows us to pay 2 generic mana and discard it to draw a card. Reanimate has us put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control, and we lose life equal to its mana value. As an option, note that we can reanimate target creature card from any graveyard and not just ours. For repeatable recursion, we have Tortured Existence and Chthonian Nightmare. We can pay a black mana and discard a creature card with Tortured Existence in order to return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand. When Chthonian Nightmare enters the battlefield, we get 3 energy counters. This enchantment allows us to pay X energy counters, sacrifice a creature, and return Chthonian Nightmare to our hand to return target creature card with mana value X from our graveyard to the battlefield. We can only activate this ability as a sorcery. So many of our combo pieces are low mana costed creatures, and if they are gathering dust in our graveyard, then repeatedly using the recursive effect of Chthonian Nightmare helps to get those creatures out of the graveyard and onto our side of the battlefield, where they belong. Now that we have unveiled the 99, let's put the pieces together and showcase alternative ways to defeat our opponents outside of combat. Our focus here is on combos that produce infinite death triggers for the purposes of draining our opponent's life totals down to 0 with 1 or more of our life-draining cards, in addition to reaping various peripheral benefits along the way. Our first combo features Chatterfang and Warren Soul Trader. We pay 1 life and sacrifice a creature to create a treasure token, which triggers Chatterfang, creating a squirrel token. We then pay 1 life and sacrifice this squirrel token to create another treasure token, which triggers Chatterfang again, creating another squirrel token. We can loop this combo infinitely if we also have Essence Warden and or Prosperous Innkeeper in play in order to nullify the life loss through the Soul Trader's ability. Even better, if we have Zilliport Cutthroat, Bastion of Remembrance, and or Nadir's Nightblade on our side of the battlefield, then we can replenish our lost life and drain our opponents down to 0. Another way to offset the life lost from this combo is to include Peregrine Took. With it, Chatterfang, and Warren Soul Trader under our control, we activate the Soul Trader by paying 1 life and sacrificing a creature to create a treasure token, which triggers both Peregrine Took and Chatterfang, respectively creating a food token and a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. We repeat this process again by using the just created squirrel creature token as the sacrificial fodder for Warren Soul Trader. We then tap and sacrifice the 2 treasure tokens and add 2 mana, which we use to activate and sacrifice a food to gain 3 life, allowing us to perform this combo infinitely. For our next combo, we need Scurry Oak in play and Yawgmoth Thran Physician in hand. We cast Yawgmoth, and when he enters the battlefield, Scurry Oak's Evolve ability triggers. With this trigger on the stack, we activate Yawgmoth's ability by paying 1 life and sacrificing a creature. Yawgmoth's ability resolves, and we put a -1/-1 counter on Scurry Oak, making it a 0/1, and we draw a card. Scurry Oak's Evolve ability resolves, and we put a +1/+1 counter on it, making it a 1/2 again. This triggers Scurry Oak's second ability. With Scurry Oak's second ability on the stack, we activate Yawgmoth's ability again by paying 1 life and sacrificing another creature. Yawgmoth's ability resolves, and we put a -1/-1 counter on Scurry Oak, making it a 0/1 again, and we draw a card. We then resolve Scurry Oak's second ability and create a 1/1 squirrel creature token. When that 1/1 squirrel creature token enters the battlefield, Scurry Oak's Evolve ability triggers because it is a 0/1. It resolves, we put a +1/+1 counter on it, making it a 1/2 again, and Scurry Oak's second ability is triggered again. With this trigger on the stack, we activate Yawgmoth again by paying 1 life and sacrificing the just created squirrel token, and continue with this combo for as long as we desire. Note that similar to the Chatterfang and Warren Soul Trader combo, nullifying life lost allows us to loop this combo infinitely. Also note that the -1/-1 counters from Yawgmoth and the +1/+1 counters from Scurry Oak's Evolve ability cancel each other out. Another combo with Warren Soul Trader and Peregrine Took involves Cauldron Familiar. We activate the Soul Trader's ability by paying 1 life and sacrificing Cauldron Familiar, creating a treasure token, which triggers Peregrine Took, creating a food token. We sacrifice the food and return Cauldron Familiar from our graveyard to the battlefield. When Cauldron Familiar enters the battlefield, it triggers, and each opponent loses 1 life, and we gain 1 life. We repeat this process until the game is over. With Pitiless Plunderer, we can continue this Peregrine Took and Cauldron Familiar combo through the use of any of our free-to-use sacrifice outlets like Spawning Pit, Woe Strider, Viscera Seer, Carrion Feeder, Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar, or Altar of Dementia. We sacrifice Cauldron Familiar to any of the aforementioned free-to-use sacrifice outlets, which triggers Pitiless Plunderer, creating a treasure token, which triggers Peregrine Took, creating a food token. We sacrifice this food token and return Cauldron Familiar from our graveyard to the battlefield. When it enters, each opponent loses 1 life, and we gain 1 life. Rinse, lather, repeat, win. Another combo requires us to have Chatterfang, Ruthless Knave, and Ashnod's Altar on our side of the battlefield. We activate Ruthless Knave's first ability by paying 2 and 1 black mana and sacrificing a creature, which creates 2 treasure tokens, which triggers Chatterfang, creating 2 1/1 squirrel creature tokens. We tap and sacrifice one of these treasure tokens and add a black mana to our mana pool. We sacrifice one of the just created Squirrel tokens to Ashnod's Altar and add 2 colorless mana to our mana pool. We use the black mana from the treasure token, the 2 colorless mana from Ashnod's Altar, and one of the Squirrel tokens from Chatterfang to activate Ruthless Knave's ability again, which creates 2 treasure tokens, which triggers Chatterfang again, creating 2 1/1 Squirrel creature tokens. We gain 1 treasure token each time we complete this combo, and if we loop this combo enough times, we can activate Ruthless Knave's second ability by sacrificing 3 treasures to draw a card. So even if we do not have a life-draining card on our side of the battlefield as we begin looping this combo, it is only a matter of time until we draw one and cast it with the treasure tokens created by Ruthless Knave. Another Chatterfang-centric combo includes Pitiless Plunderer. We can pay a black mana and sacrifice 2 other squirrels to activate our general's ability, which triggers Pitiless Plunderer, creating 2 treasure tokens, which triggers Chatterfang, creating 2 1/1 squirrel creature tokens. We tap and sacrifice a treasure to add a black mana, and we begin looping this combo. Even without a life-draining component to secure the victory, we can use this combo to rid the battlefield of all of our opponent's creatures, while also stockpiling treasure tokens to use throughout the rest of the game. Another 2-card combo is Mazarek, Crawl Deathpriest, and Skirryoke. We sacrifice a creature to any of our free-to-use sacrifice outlets. When we do this, Mazarek triggers, putting a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. When a +1/+1 counter is placed onto Skirryoke, its second ability triggers, creating a 1/1 squirrel creature token, which we will use to sacrifice to one of the aforementioned free-to-use sacrifice outlets, which triggers Mazarek again, putting a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, which triggers Skirryoke again, creating a 1/1 squirrel creature token again, which eventually has us win the game again. With Eternal Witness and Phyrexian Altar on our side of the battlefield and Unearth in our hand, we sacrifice Eternal Witness to Phyrexian Altar and add 1 black mana to our mana pool. We use this 1 black mana to cast Unearth, returning Eternal Witness from our graveyard to the battlefield. When Eternal Witness enters, it triggers, and we return Unearth from our graveyard to our hand. Add one of our life-draining cards to this combo for an eventual round of good games. A little trickier combo includes Camellia the Seed Miser, Peregrine Took, Ashnod's Altar, and a food token under our control. We activate Camellia's Forage ability by paying 2 mana and sacrificing a food token. This triggers Camellia, creating a 1/1 squirrel creature token, which triggers Peregrine Took, creating a food token. Camellia's Forage ability resolves, and we put a +1/+1 counter on each other squirrel we control. We sacrifice the just created squirrel creature token to Ashnod's Altar and add 2 colorless mana to our mana pool. We use this 2 colorless mana, sacrifice a food token, and activate Camellia's Forage ability again. And we continue to loop this combo until our opponents are drained out by one of our oft-mentioned life-draining cards. This last combo is also a little tricky, but with Peregrine Took and Experimental Confectioner on our side of the battlefield, in addition to 3 food tokens, we can sacrifice these 3 food tokens to activate the Took's card drawing ability, which triggers Experimental Confectioner 3 times, creating 3 1/1 rat creature tokens, which triggers Peregrine Took 3 times, creating 3 food tokens. We continue to loop this combo until we drain our opponent's life totals down to 0. Hopefully, we will not drain our opponent's desire to play Magic with us again in the future. This Chatterfang build has been added to the Burgeoning Commander Catalog, and this video also becomes the starting point of a Chatterfang EDH deck video primer series. These playlist series can be accessed in the description below on our YouTube page or at the end of this video. The Burgeoning Commander Catalog is my personal collection of EDH decks. An EDH deck video primer series showcases the continued evolution of a deck through future appearances on the Up and Up series, during which we update and upgrade decks featured on this channel. The full card list for this build can be found in the description, and be sure to share your thoughts about this Chatterfang deck in the comments section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.